Alright guys, Estimate1080p here, and today I thought I'd take a look at the very rare premium aircraft, the D.521. This is a plane you're probably, most likely, never going to see in game, probably once every 10,000 games. You might catch a glimpse of one, but it's one you could probably go play in the game for years and never see at all. And that is for a very good reason. This aircraft was only ever given out as part of a French promotion with MSI, or during a War Thunder contest for the Vive la France competition. I can't remember what it was called, the Liberation of Paris, something along those lines. But much like seeing it in game, finding actually any solid information historically on this aircraft is extremely difficult. It's one that came at a very difficult time. Obviously it was being tested when the Germans were rapidly advancing into France, and I don't think it was actually properly even put into any kind of testing until it's a blind spot, put it that way. It's in a blind spot in history where it's very difficult to find solid information that you can trust, that you could officially or even responsibly present as truth. So the facts and figures of this aircraft are rather mysterious. There's a few things that are known about it, but there's a few things that are not. Obviously it's based on the D.520, which was the standard French fighter of the day. This is available in War Thunder as a normal premium. You can get it in the starter pack, you can get it in with Golden Eagles, and it was the standard French fighter of the day. Very underrated in my opinion. It is a very decent aircraft, a good adversary to the Bf-109E, and it's a great plane to fly. It really is quite a nice addition to the British tree as a premium, and I'm looking forward to any other different French aircraft similar to this. It really provides a difference to things like the Spitfires. You're going to use a lot of these in the British tree. It provides a nice change up very early on. The D.521 was a progression of the D.520, which basically tried to make more out of an airframe without making any radical changes. The main difference was that I'm not sure how well this is reflected at the moment, is rather than having the engine that the D.520 had, which I really don't know what it was a French yeah, I don't know what it was. Rather than having this engine that the D.520 had, it had a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, which is the kind of one you'd find in a Spitfire or a Hurricane. So obviously that is quite a radical change from something like this, which is rather small when you look at it in comparison to a much more bigger Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Obviously that's going to have an impact on the flight characteristics and things like that. Again, finding solid information on this is not easy. All that you can find is it had a Merlin. You can't really discover which one it was, when it was equipped with that, the kind of changes the airframe had. You can find a design drawing of the D.521 where it shows the longer engine cowling, and apparently it had a de Havilland roll-toe prop, which was the kind of one you'd see on a Spitfire and Hurricane with a Merlin. Whether it's this exact one, again, the information is not very solid, so you can't really judge whether it is or not. Apart from that, the changes were kind of minuscule after the engine. That was kind of the major change. There was a few internal differences, obviously, because of the Merlin, but the only other major change was the armament. The D.520 carries a standard armament of 1 Hispano Suiza cannon and 4 of the Mach 1934 7.5 machine guns, which is these one here, and there's 4 of those, 2 in each wing, and obviously the cannon in the nose. The D.521 actually, because the Merlin doesn't allow for a cannon to be placed in the nose, which is the same as what these ones all have. Most of the Germans have nose-mounted cannons. Quite a lot of the Yaks, or all of the Yaks, have nose-mounted cannons. The British never done it because the Merlin's arrangement doesn't really allow for a cannon to go through the nose without serious modification. It probably could have been done. I don't know whether it was tested or not, but the Merlin isn't one that automatically allows it. The V is not there, the engine block where they can put a cannon over it. So with the D.521 they actually took the cannon out of the nose, put the Merlin in, and they had 2 Hispano cannons in the wings. These first ports here would be the Hispanos, and then the outer 2 would be the Mach 1934 7.5 machine guns. At the moment this isn't reflected in game. I'm pretty sure it will be changed. But obviously so few have this aircraft that it's not exactly a major priority because it's a very limited aircraft. So I would expect that to come in the future, but obviously this aircraft is very, very hard to find solid and reliable information on. What I'm presenting to you now is just what I've found after quite a few hours of research. Most pages will disagree with each other, quite a few agree, and the points that agree is the ones I've just presented to you. Obviously the Merlin, like I've said, you don't really know which one it was. The armament, again, they'll disagree and say it had two Hispanos mounted up here, which again isn't really possible with the Merlin. That's why most British armament on Spitfires was always wing mounted. It's very, very difficult to mount something in the engine cowling or on the engine cowling like it is with a 109, because most of the 109s have inverted engines, so it's easier. The Yaks have like that V block where they can slide it over the top. It's just not possible with the Merlin. So I'd guess the armament would be correct that I've found, which is the two Hispanos here and here, and the two outboard machine guns of the Mac 1934. Other than that, the information on this plane is really, really limited. You generally cannot find anything by doing a thorough web search. It is very, very difficult. Most books don't even speak of this thing. Like I said, its fate is generally unknown. You can't really find out what happened to it. It's believed that the airframe was kept, the Merlin removed, and it became the D.524 or the D.504. I generally don't know which one it was. But basically, the airframe was more valuable than the engine or anything else, and the D.521 wasn't properly seen through because it had problems. Obviously, without developing the airframe, the Merlin is going to be a massive weight on the front. And whilst the rate of climb and things like that were improved, I think the manoeuvrability was generally much worse because of the heavier weight, and it just wasn't designed for the airframe. So there were problems, and it wasn't mass produced. That's literally all I could find on it. It's a very, very, very mysterious aircraft, and why I love having it in game. It's a fantastic plane to use. The colour scheme I love on this. This is just a Free France. I think it's Free France. Free French. Free France. Liberation of France. There you go. Obviously the D-Day stripes. I'm guessing they're D-Day stripes. They're close to D-Day stripes. I'm not great with French aircraft. I just love this one. Love the D.521. In game, it has a lower battle rating than the D.520. I'm guessing that's obviously because a lot less people have them. The D.520 sits at 3.0 and the D.521 at 2.7. Its statistics are there for you to see. It's a great little aircraft. As it is gift, it does come unupgraded, so you do have to unlock all these yourself. I put a talisman on it because it is just a great aircraft to fly. And if you've ever used the D.520, you would know this thing is amazing in arcade. It does have very limited ammunition, but obviously it can be reloaded in arcade. The cannon is so much more reliable than the early British ones that you can find on things like the VB, the VC. It fires significantly faster in my opinion, and it just seems more accurate as well because it's nose mounted. Obviously that could change if they ever go to the wing mounted armament. But for the moment, it is a fantastic little aircraft to fly. If you have the D.520, you know what to expect here. They're almost the same, I believe, when they are upgraded, if not the same. It looks the same, potentially. But it's a fantastic little aircraft. In arcade, it does benefit having two of these if you like playing arcade. I personally don't, but in realistic, it is still a fantastic aircraft. Can't speak for sim battles because I haven't taken it out in that. I don't really fly sim battles because it usually ends up with me face hugging the runway, so I don't think I will try that in this. But it is a real fantastic little aircraft to fly, and I'll get onto some gameplay in a minute. But from what you can see, it is generally the same model at the moment as the D.521 to all extensive purposes. Obviously it has the little antenna that folds down when the gear goes up. Same armament, which you can see there. Obviously you can customise it and put stuff on it if you wanted to, but I really like this Liberation of France scheme. It does look quite nice, and it's different to the D.520. Obviously with user skins you could just put that skin on the D.520, but there is plenty of really nice ones out there for both of them, so it's definitely not something you need to short of there. But anyway, onto the gameplay of this aircraft. Okay, so first up we have Korea, which is against the Russians. This isn't something that you're going to see often. Sometimes it's the alternate history of Berlin map instead. That seems to be the one that comes up more and more. But sometimes you will get Korea, and it will be around the 2.7 to about the 3.3 battle rating mark. And you're usually with Hellcats, early Corsairs, Spitfire 1s, 2s, sometimes the Hurricanes. and it can even be sometimes the early Typhoon Mark 1A. Your teams, you'll generally start to see the similar pattern as the D.520. There's not that much difference in battle rating. They generally get the same sort of games. But it is a great little aircraft, especially against the Russians. The one thing you do have to remember, this thing is a good turn fighter, but it's not a good turn fighter against every plane. Obviously the golden rule is the 0, you never ever do it against that. And generally against LA5s and Yaks, it's not too fantastic. It's better than the 109. You can do it against 109s. I wouldn't try it against Spitfires, not that you'll be facing Spitfires. And I definitely wouldn't try it against Yaks or LAs. Zeros, like I said, are the obvious ones not to do anyway. But it does retain energy somewhat well. There is a few problems with the nose, both coming in and out of a dive, and also when you're trying to point the gun. It's a similar sort of thing to the Hellcat and the Kitty Hawk, where the nose seems to be slightly heavier, and the rudder authority is not quite there, so when you're aiming, the nose does take its time to swing up into position. If you've played the Vampire and Jet battles, it's similar to that as well. It's difficult to aim in some respects because the tail and the nose seem to sort of battle each other almost. The rudder's trying to conflict with the nose and the nose doesn't come up in time. But you can see here, this LA5, there's no way I'm going to try and directly turn fight him. I could, and I probably could do reasonably well, but me and this Spitfire already on him, there's no reason to engage a turn fight with him. He's got it clear that he's going to try and run, but I've got the better energy. Small and sharp turns like scissors and things like that, you can do it and it does work. You can see here, just after a few hits, just saw him in half. The 20 mils on this are fantastic, or the 20mm is fantastic. It's really fast fire and really accurate because it's in the nose. And generally the 7.5s aren't that bad at all. They do help quite a bit, as much as people hate the 7.7s and things like that. I always like them, especially when you have about 2,700 rounds of them. They do indeed come in handy. The D.521, with or without them, if you run out of cannon ammo, it's not the end of the world. Obviously you do need it for things like Dorniers. A lot of the time you will come into contact with the Dornier night fighters, the heavy fighters, things like BF-110s. I don't think you'd ever see a Messerschmitt 410. But a lot of the heavy twins do require cannons to go down. If you see a Dornier and you're out of cannon ammo, I generally wouldn't bother with it. There must be someone else you can select near him, or pull off the engagement, go back to base rearm, or like I said, just find a better target. You can try it and go at them with the 7.5s, but you're probably going to use all 2,000 just to set him alight, and even then he'd get back to base. This one on Malta was against the Germans, and you see an example of that here. There was a Dornier, but I was waiting, biding my chance. Generally against the Germans, provided no one has an air start, you should be around 109 level by the time they do come at you. Don't know why that guy was shooting at me on takeoff there, but it's, you know. This thing has basically an unlimited WEP. You can hold WEP down and that's it, you're sorted. I start off by setting it at a 15-degree climb most of the time. Other times you can just go straight to 20. Really depends on what you want. Usually about 17, 18 degrees is the best angle of climb for this thing. But generally you'll find you're above most things, and what you're not, you can probably outturn in most respects. This 109 here, this is an example of the nose. Partly it was my bad aiming, but you will see times where, like, you're probably going to say to yourself, just pull up a bit more, or just turn the nose a little bit more. You can see where I'm trying to battle the controls with the nose here. The 109 tried to head on me, not going to let that happen. I do outturn him, especially when he has more energy. I'm easily going to outturn him. No issues there, but you can see there's certain times where I have clear lines of sight and clear fire, but I don't like holding the trigger down on this thing. It doesn't jam that easily, but the ammunition goes so quick because it fires faster than Hispanos. I just like to do small bursts like you see here. I could have got in there on that first engagement, but the nose just did not want to go down that little bit more. I don't know what it is, whether there's a way you can battle it. Again, it feels like I was battling the controls there. But it's just the characteristic of the aircraft. It's like the Corsair, the Hellcat, the Kitty Hawk. Most aircraft that have heavier noses, they do tend to slightly, I guess, not battle you, but they tend to battle the control input. I don't know if it's the instructor conflicting with them again. I was being a bit too That was a bit too much of a wildfire there. I don't think what I was trying to get there, but there's a couple of shots here you can see I'm just being a little bit too over estimative. I'm just guessing to try and take shots. This thing is not something you really want to spray with. It's not something you want to hold the trigger down with. You can see here I'm only taking very small little bursts. That's for a good reason. You will easily burn through this Hispano. Like I've said, the fire rate is insane. It is a lot more accurate, so when you do hit the target, you definitely hit them. And for some reason, this guy decided to bail out. I don't know why. But that was that. This game is the longest gameplay I'm going to show you. This was against the Japanese, and this is where this thing has most of its issues, because the kind of zeros you're going to be facing, the A6M2, the A6M3, I'm not going to say they can keep up with you, but they kind of can. Initially, if you don't have an energy advantage over them, it is entirely possible for them to retain the same energy as you. This thing is not a fast prop to any extent. It's not like a Corsair. It's kind of like a Spitfire, so almost. It's somewhere in between a Spitfire and a Zero, I'd say, but it's not got the turning ability of either of them. It's got more, slightly better than a 109 turning. It's a really hard plane to describe in many respects. Obviously it's the same as the D.520, so if you've flown that you know what it's like. But against the Japanese, I feel, is where this thing struggles the most. It's not like a Spitfire when you can generally put it into a dive or just go in level flight and you're out running zeros. This thing you really do have to nose down quite sharply, because a zero can catch you if you're both coming out of a dive. You level out and he doesn't. If he carries on and he gets more energy, he can catch you, and if you've definitely not got as much energy as him, he will catch you. Things like the Ki-61, you could turn fight, and I probably do and have done in many cases, but again, like the LA5s, it's not something I'd say do it, because they're kind of unpredictable. I don't really know what has the better turning advantage, a D520 or a Ki-61. Really, I'm not too sure, but I wouldn't advise it. Zeros are the biggest pain to this thing, and you'll see this game why, basically. This was kind of setting itself up to fail. This is New Guinea, and you can see half of my team down there, which is P63s, Corsairs, Spitfires, didn't bother to climb. They've just gone straight and level into battle. And obviously the Zeros and the Ki-61s are miles above them. So this I wasn't expecting to go too well. This Zero immediately peels off and starts to come after me, and you can see here I'm not exactly diving, but I've got my nose slightly down, and he is still catching up to me. Obviously he has the better energy than me. But this is an example of how you cannot underestimate zeros in this thing. It's not like you're flying a plane that cannot easily, outrun them in level flight. It doesn't work like that. This thing is, you have to be overcautious, especially against the Japanese. And this is probably where this plane will have its most difficulty against the Japanese. Against the Americans, fairly easy. They'll just try and turn fight you. You just turn fight them back and win. Sometimes you get the occasional ones with boom and zoom, and they know what they're doing. Against the Russians, again, a mixture of boom and zoom and turn fighting where applicable is always best. Germans, turn fighting generally wins. The 109Es, especially on the Battle of Britain event, which this thing can participate in, you do have to be careful on. Their lower speeds, they can turn with you almost. At their higher speeds, obviously, provided you don't have more energy than they do, you should be able to outturn them. The Japanese, like I said, is the anomaly for this thing. It's where your boom and zoom can work, but not as well, and your turn fighting is really not advisable. Obviously, like I said, I'm probably going to do that anyway. But here, this situation was getting worse and worse. I'm trying to lead them away from my teammates because that situation's already bad. Then they decided to peel off. I decided to peel back. This Zero obviously was smart enough to turn back round again. The Ki-61 couldn't make his mind up. And you can see here, this Zero, that's a manoeuvre Zeros always do. If you dive away from them, they'll loop round, come underneath you and pull back up. And then they have the better energy advantage. And you can see this guy could have had a kill shot there, and that was a pretty stupid move by me. He did hit me, and it doesn't show on the damage indicator that I've taken any damage, but the 20mm has sort of made my wing lean a bit to the right, and you'll notice that a couple of times, the plane sort of leaning itself to the right a little bit, and it does make the controls a little bit heavier, which was awkward. But genuinely it didn't have that much of an impact, but it completely ruined me. Again, this mosh pit going on down here, I knew this was going to happen. The Spitfires and Typhoons are getting completely obliterated. The P63 is nowhere to be seen at the moment, and the A6M3s are having a field day. And then this Corsair shows up, and he is a serious danger. Obviously the Zeros will probably kill them anyway, but the Corsair is one that you really can't allow to live when your team are all low, because he will eat them for breakfast. So I decided to go for him. And you can see here the accuracy of the cannon. This is an example of how it can work really well. A couple of shots and he's on fire. That was a decent amount of cooperation there by that Spitfire. He's fighting off a good 4 or 5 of them on his own there. And I did come in to help him, but that is not a mosh pit you want to stay in. You immediately put your wet back on again and try and get out of there. And now they're coming back for me. The Spitfire's gone down. And for some reason the Bowfighter is randomly hanging around the ships. I don't know what he's doing. And 2 Spitfires, or a Spitfire and a Typhoon, have decided that KI-102 is more important than any of the rest. So they're going to go 12 kilometers out just to try and chase in. So at the moment it's not going too well, to say the least. Roughly even numbers, but against Japanese I'd never take even numbers as an advantage, because they will immediately wipe the floor with anyone who tries to turn fight them. They look like they've broken off to go over that after that Bowfighter there, so I've come back round. The P-63 has finally decided to show up, and he's coming out of a dive. I don't know where he'd been. And at the moment I'm going to just prioritise the A6M3s and the KI-61, or whatever's closest. The A6M2s I'm not that worried about, because generally I think I can outspeed them. But again, Zeros are unpredictable. I wouldn't recommend immediately relying on your level flight speed and dive speed. The A6M3s are the ones I'm more concerned about at the moment. The Bowfighter doesn't even seem to be aware they're coming for him, so he's going to have a bit of a shock. I don't know quite what was going through his mind right there, but at the moment I'm just going to keep climbing out, because it's going to go bad. You can see what's going to happen. So after a continued long flight out, the Bowfighter, I don't know if he died at this point, or if he'd I'm going to guess he died. He did die, I know that, but I don't know when. At the moment there's 2 Zeros and a KI-61 trying to maneuver on me. Again, that classic Zero move where they loop back round and they have more energy. He could have again had a kill shot here, but by this point I think all of the Zeros are out of their 20mm, which was luckily for me. Once they're out of their 20s, the 7.7s obviously can set you on fire, they can do a bit of damage, but when they're chasing you they tend to spray them quite a lot as well, so they'll quickly run out of those. I'm not too concerned with that. Finally those guys now the KI-102, so that might mean they'll be back in this fight now. And again you can see here that Zero is still relatively keeping pace with me until he decides to pull off, and the KI-61 pulls off with him. So I look back over and come back round again. But they're no idiots, they know exactly what I'm doing. And they're going to try and finish off those Spitfires. I don't know why everyone suddenly starts crashing and what the hell is going on here, but the Zeros again are swarming. Spitfire is still 9 kilometers out over there. I had no idea what he's doing. They've just finished off that 102, so I'm guessing they'd be back for combat now. But obviously that's not the case. These guys here, they obviously knew I'm here. I'm guessing they're trying to lead me into a dive, so I lose some of my energy once I come out of it. Another guy had gone down there. The KI-61 is going to realise after the Zero's pulled up, and he's going to try and head on me coming over the top there, as you can see. I just moved up a little bit just so he couldn't have a clean dive on me. The P-63 I think is on fire, or he's about to be on fire. Yep, he's on fire. KI-61 luckily got a few hits there, and it was a pilot snipe, couldn't have asked for anything better there. Only used a few cannon rounds, but I'm down to 27 now, so it's either the choice of going back to base or staying and fighting. And going back to base for me wasn't really an option, because that P-63 is dead. That Spitfire, I have no idea what he's doing at the moment, but he's about to be dead. He just seems to crash. So there's that, which leaves me with, I believe, 3 Zeros. One of them is an A6M3 and the other 2 are A6M2s. So I'm more concerned with them than anything else at the moment. These guys seem to know what they're doing, and they're no fools to what I'm going to do. So this guy decides to break off and go for ground targets, but by the time I've looped around, the Zero can turn a lot quicker than me. He's immediately going to come back for a head-on again. But like I said, by now they're all out of their 20s. So I'm not that concerned with doing head-ons, but it's still something I never like to do. Even if I was in something like a Bowfighter against the KI-43, I just don't like head-ons. It's something where you're losing all of your advantages and giving them free shots at you. Even if you do have the better firepower, there's always that 0.1% they could just get a pilot snipe or something like that. So I do it when I have to. but I don't like doing it. And that A6M3 is again looped back on my tail. Luckily I've got the better energy advantage, so I can pull away. That Zero has decided that that destroyer was apparently a carrier and decided to crash into it. I don't know why. But you can see the D.521, the kind of enemies it will face, you have to show respect to in many cases. The Americans, you won't really face them that often. I don't think this thing hardly ever sees Hokkaido or the training exercise, whatever you want to call it. Alternate history is probably this thing's main battle in succession. You'll get that quite a lot. Sometimes, like I said, Korea. But it's really when you show the Japanese, or see the Japanese, it's where you've got to show them respect and really keep your wits about you, because it's extremely unpredictable, as you're about to see now. Like I said, I'm on 27 rounds of ammunition. Going back to base wasn't really a choice for me, because they would have landed, they would have got their ammunition back, and it would have just been fighting a losing battle from the get-go. And I'm already fighting a losing battle now, so I didn't want to make it much worse. I chose to dive on this guy, I don't know why, because I knew exactly that he was going to turn inside me, and that other Zero was going to have a couple of free shots at me. Luckily they both kind of overshot their estimates. The other guy is about to overshoot, I think. Yep. I could have possibly swung the fuselage back over and got on that guy's tail, but he would have just looped out-looped me, so there wasn't really much point. This guy's going low and slow, so decided to go for him, but obviously he's looped back round and gone for the head-on. And again, I've just got to pull away from these guys and try and get a big enough gap so I can come back round again. By this point, I'm just thinking the head-on is possibly my only way of winning this game. They're down to 7.7s, I've got 27 rounds of ammunition. It's really possibly my best chance of getting any sort of win out of this. And it's why that with the D.521, just as much as it is the D.520, ammunition management of this 20, the only 20mm it's got, is critical. This thing is not like a normal Hispano you see on Spitfires. It fires a lot faster, it's a lot more accurate, it's generally a better gun, but you find yourself out of ammunition after possibly about 2 seconds of continuous fire, so you have to remember ammunition management with this thing is critical and key to this plane's survival, particularly against the Japanese when you really do need that cannon to put them down quickly. Even if I'd have had my 7.5s alone, I probably would have chanced to head on with these guys. Their 7.7 fires a lot slower than my 7.5s, and I've got 4 of them, they have 2 of them, but theirs is nose mounted, so there is always the possibility they could win. And now's the time I'm going for the head on. It's the only opportunity I'm going to have, and this is where it gets a bit crazy and where I don't know what happened. I set this guy on fire, which I was really happy with. That was him done and dusted. And then this guy, I thought I'd just do the same thing, go for the head on and hopefully win, but he obviously had the similar idea. The other guy behind me is on fire. I don't know why he's not dead yet, but I tried to pull out of this, but he just goes for the saw my wing off. And of course, because it's a Zero, he's still got his wing somehow. So he carries on flying, and he manages to damage the other guy, stealing my kill from me and getting me assist. So that was always fun. I generally don't know what happened there, but that's probably the most random you'll ever see in a D.521. So after those battles, you can see the kind of things you're going to expect with a D.521. Generally it's the same as the D.520, and if you can't get your hands on one of these, I'd definitely recommend a D.520. They are both fantastic little aircraft. If you see one of these in game, I'd treasure the moment, because you're probably never going to see it again. It is a very, very rare aircraft indeed. If you can get hold of one, like I said, they're worth their weight in gold to you as an arcade player. In realistic battles, again, it's still fantastic, but I would recommend getting a talisman. It just helps with credit income and RP gain. It's, you know, a fantastic little aircraft with one of those, and it's easily worth it. It's about 800 or 900 gold, I think. It's definitely worth it. Sim battles, I can't really speak for them. I'd guess it would be a great aircraft because you don't have the instructor battling you. And that is probably its only disadvantage, I'd say, is the fact that the instructor seems to battle you with the rudder and the nose. It's very hard to aim the nose of this thing. But that Hispano is easily one of its greatest assets. How long it's going to keep it in the nose, I don't know. Even if it does go for the wing-mounted armament, it will still be very, very useful. But for the moment, this is easily one of the best cannons in game. The French Hispano Suiza 404 is fantastic. Wing-mounted or nose-mounted, I'm guessing it's going to be this good always. You just have to be very, very cautious with your ammo. Don't spray too much, just be conservative. And like I said, just getting used to that nose is probably the only real hardship of this aircraft. The battle rating is fantastic on both of them. They do face generally, I don't want to say easy enemies, but ones that you could learn the ins and outs of quite well. The Japanese are the ones you have to show the most respect to in a battle, definitely, hands down, and they will present the biggest challenge. But the Americans, Germans and Russians, there's not really that much there you have to worry about. So it is really a fantastic aircraft to fly. All round, it's a fantastic plane. If you ever could get hold of one, I'd easily recommend it. Like I said, just get the talisman for it. Arcade players, it will benefit you no end, because it is, you know, a fantastic plane for that. Realistic, again, fantastic aircraft to fly. In sim battles, I'd guess it would be fantastic without that instructor. I really can't speak. If you've flown this thing in sim battles, you know what to expect. But easily worth getting both of these if you can. Fantastic aircraft. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.